everybody, it's Alicia, and I'm sitting here with my 1937 stitch. I've removed the scroll faceplate and the throat plate from the machine already. When you go to clean that, you will just have to unscrew the screws for the throat plate here and then just twist off the knob for the faceplate to remove that. So basically, I have finished up a project. Many of you guys were watching for my Christmas gifts. I made some hot pads and I made some soup bowl cozies. And with that, I used that Insulbright, and I'm not really a huge fan of it. It left a mess not only all over my machine, and I do mean all over my machine, but all over my table, my floor as well. And so it wasn't really the most fun thing to work with. But this machine also has not been properly oiled and greased since that project, and I wanted to also talk and address when we should grease the motor back here. So we're going to go ahead and do that today because it has been past the 6-month period. Even though I haven't done a bunch of sewing on it, it still needs to be gone over. So what I've got here is a few tools that helped me to remove the throat plate off of there. You can use a regular screwdriver, but I found that that was really hard. So we actually have this little guy here. I don't even know. Do you know what size this is?
It doesn't matter. I modified it.
Okay,
the tip was too fat, so I filed it down.
That is true.
And this one was too wide, so I filed it down.
Yeah. So that's a modified tool, so sorry I can't give you any more information on that.
Custom.
But yeah, it's a custom tool that we use to remove the throat plate off of there. And then in this particular instance, I could remove the feed dogs, but I'm going to actually use this little guy here. And yeah, he is a little bit on the gross side when it comes to this because this is what I clean the gears with. But I'm going to use this little brush on the other side to just kind of gradually pull this stuff back towards me. And while I'm actually thinking about it, Steven, I'll have you hold the camera. I'm going to go ahead and take off this particular presser foot just so that way I can really get in there. And you just want to get as much of this lint out as possible. And it may even be better to get the threadostats. Many of you guys have probably seen those on the Featherweight shop's website, and many of you might actually own them. So let me grab those really fast. They're these guys right here, and if you are a doctor or a nurse, you guys have the regular helostats that you could use. So I'm just basically getting into those crooks and crevices to try to get out all of that dust. And honestly, just kind of brushing it out either towards you down in this area, so that way when you turn this around, it's all going to fall down here, which once again, we can just take this brush and just brush that out. You could even, if you have a very small attachment on your vacuum cleaner, being really careful to mind that these fibers, I don't know if they would scratch or leave little scratches in the paint or not, but you could run the vacuum cleaner in there with a small attachment, which would be great for getting a lot of that dust out of there as well. So you should not have to remove your bobbin assembly for doing this either, unless you notice that there's a lot of thread and such down there. And I may actually need to take off the feed dogs there. I can't tell how much is up underneath there or not. Just try to get this as best as we can here, and to save time, I will, I guess I could go that way. But to save time, I will do the feed dog area later. I just really want to get the majority of it out of there. So then, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to go ahead and go through and re-oil my machine before I put it away. With this bobbin assembly, even though I'm oiling it now, I'll have to re-oil that before I start sewing. So I'm just gonna put a drop of oil in either one of, or each of those. I do each of the little holes here. And then I'm just gonna briefly turn that just to kind of lubricate that and get that in there. The other thing also, remember that this little foot here needs to go into this slot here on our throat plate. And while I've got that off, I'm just gonna go ahead and just brush that out as well. You guys may hear Cheddar saying peekaboo in the background. Just to kind of keep that clean too. So I'm going to go ahead and oil up here first since I've got that already done. And I'm just gonna go ahead, and there are little tiny oiling point holes in here, which is why I really like, so there's one here. I really like this brass tip oil bottle, mainly because it allows you to get into all of those hard to reach places. And I'm just gonna stick another thing down there and run this through. And this, I just wanna make sure it's properly lubricated before I put it away, so that way when I get this machine back out, it should be ready to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and cover that up. I'm also gonna go ahead and I'm going to tip it here. And I'm gonna go ahead and remove this bottom because I'm going to oil underneath the underside of this. Just because my machine has not been oiled since I did the restoration on this machine, which was well over 6 months ago. As many of you know, I don't always have enough time to do a bunch of projects, which my goal for 2019 is to do more projects. So this machine will definitely be used more. But I don't have to oil mine as much because it was just sitting not in use. But after that big project, I really want to get in there and just get as much as I can done. The grease on there, do you think I should do the grease on there? I mean, it looks like there's enough on there, and we can clean those off at a different day. But I think for the most part, you really shouldn't have to re-grease the gears on your Featherweight every time that you sew. That's a little bit excessive.
The grease won't dissipate the same way that oil does, so if you're not using it a whole bunch, you don't need to re-grease it. If you are doing a couple quilts, yeah, you should re-grease it every, I think it says 3 or 6 months, depending on the location.
Well, that's definitely for the motor, but I can double check and we can put it underneath the comment section of this particular video. But honestly, if you're not sewing as that much, you don't need to. So I've got my finger in between the spot on the throat plate, and I can go ahead and stick my screws down in there. And the thing about these screws too is you don't have to screw them down super tight because you don't want to strip them. And at the same time, they don't need to be tight. It's not really, I mean, it's holding down the throat plate, but it's not like holding two pieces of something together that it's like imperative that it be super tight. And even when you start these, be really careful because it's not always the easiest. And yeah, I'm using this little tiny screwdriver.
But you really don't want to over tighten it because you'll mess up the head of the screw, which will make it snag your fabric.
And almost impossible to get out again. This actually takes a little bit longer, which is for all intents and purposes for the video. But I can just lightly stick these in there and then move on.
It's actually the other side.
What? What's the other side?
My tool.
What are you talking about?
This side with the notch was made for the feed dogs. This side without the notch was for the throat plate.
Okay, so this right here is the fun part. If you get your grease from the Featherweight shop, which is where we get ours from, and when we do restoration and you order the grease through us, that's where we're ordering it from. they have a really cool, and I've made this in numerous videos before, I really like how they have this handy, easy to follow instructions that fit right inside of the tube that you keep it in. And it comes with this, looks like a little tiny straw, and all you're gonna do...
You don't need to do that.
Why?
That grease has not been sitting around for years. It's still good. You just gotta add more so it keeps funneling onto the brushes or the wicking
I wanted to
pads.
kind of show them what it looks like when you clean it out.
Okay.
Just entertainment purposes. Plus, this machine actually, like, I don't remember, it doesn't even look like it needs to be re-greased, actually. My machine, I think it's been over 6 months, because I can't remember when we actually got this
You want me to
machine.
re-grease it with use.
Haha, that's a good one.
It's like the gears. If you don't use them, grease is still there.
So I'll just go ahead and stick some in there. I will say this, it was fun sewing on it over Christmas. I just always get nervous when I have stuff around and the kids. But, so now my machine is pretty much good to go. All I have to do is stick this back into, well actually go ahead and put the bobbin case back on the bobbin assembly and stick the presser foot back on there, and I might wipe it down a little bit just because it's got some smudges, and then it should be good to go for the next time that I sew, which, like I said, my goal for 2019 is to really and truly get more sewing projects done, and we will go from there. So thank you all so much for joining us here at Featherweight 38. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.